America, often called the land of opportunity, is also home to one of the worst homelessness crises in the modern world. Every night, more than 650,000 people sleep on the streets, in cars, or in overcrowded shelters. These are men, women, children, veterans, and even entire families, struggling to survive in a country that prides itself on prosperity. While homelessness is often portrayed as a personal failure, the truth is far more complex. It is the result of a broken system, soaring housing costs, stagnant wages, underfunded mental health services, and a government that prioritizes short-term fixes over long-term solutions. Despite spending billions on homeless assistance programs, the crisis has only grown worse. But why? What went wrong? And what will it take to actually end homelessness in America? A crisis decades in the making. While homelessness has existed for centuries, the situation in America today can be traced back to policy decisions from the 1980s. During this time, the federal government drastically cut funding for public housing and mental health services, leading to a dramatic rise in the number of people living on the streets. Cities began seeing growing numbers of homeless individuals, many of whom had previously been housed in mental health institutions or low-income housing programs that no longer existed. Fast forward to today, and these problems have only worsened. The cost of living has skyrocketed, with housing costs outpacing wage growth in nearly every major city. In places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, the cost of rent has reached astronomical levels, making it nearly impossible for low-income individuals to afford a place to live. A minimum wage worker in these cities would have to work over 80 hours a week just to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment. Even those earning a decent salary can find themselves struggling to keep up with rent, especially when faced with unexpected medical bills, job loss, or family emergencies. As a result, millions of Americans are living one paycheck away from homelessness. They are walking a tightrope, where a single financial setback could mean losing everything. For many, homelessness does not happen overnight. It starts with falling behind on rent, then moving into a friend's house, then a motel, and finally, the streets. The hidden faces of homelessness. When most people think of homelessness, they imagine individuals sleeping on park benches or in tent cities. But homelessness takes many forms, and the reality is often more complex than what is visible at first glance. The working homeless, one of the fastest-growing segments of the homeless population, is people who have jobs but still cannot afford stable housing. These individuals might work full-time as restaurant servers, retail employees, or even school teachers, yet they are forced to live in their cars, in shelters, or on the streets. Despite working hard, the high cost of housing leaves them with no options. Many of these individuals move from place to place, sleeping in their vehicles, showering at public gyms, and trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy. They go to work every day while carrying the stress of not knowing where they will sleep that night. Some employers and co-workers may never realize they are homeless. Families with children. Contrary to popular belief, families with children make up over 30% of the homeless population. Many of these families have been displaced due to rising rents, domestic violence, or sudden financial hardship. With limited shelter options available, parents often struggle to find a safe place for their children to sleep. Children who experience homelessness are at higher risk of falling behind in school, developing mental health issues, and experiencing homelessness as adults. A child who grows up without stability often faces challenges that last a lifetime. The trauma of constantly moving, missing school, and lacking basic necessities can severely impact their future opportunities. Veterans. It is estimated that nearly 40,000 veterans are homeless on any given night in America. These are men and women who once served their country, only to be abandoned when they returned home. Many struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, physical disabilities, and a lack of support systems. While some veteran assistance programs exist, they are often underfunded and difficult to navigate. Without proper mental health care and stable housing, many veterans end up in a cycle of chronic homelessness. Individuals with mental illness. Approximately 25% of homeless individuals suffer from severe mental illness, yet mental health care in America remains largely inaccessible to those who need it most. Decades of underfunding and the closure of psychiatric hospitals have left many mentally ill individuals with nowhere to turn. Without treatment, conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe depression make it nearly impossible for individuals to hold a job or maintain stable housing. Instead of receiving proper medical care, many end up on the streets or in jail, where they are often punished rather than helped. How cities are failing the homeless. Instead of addressing the root causes of homelessness, many cities have turned to criminalization as their primary response. Laws that make it illegal to sleep in public spaces, sit on sidewalks, or set up tents have led to thousands of homeless individuals being arrested or fined, often for simply trying to survive. Police sweeps regularly destroy homeless encampments, confiscating personal belongings, medications, and important documents. While some cities have invested in shelters and temporary housing, these solutions are often inadequate. Many shelters have strict rules, such as requiring individuals to be sober, limiting how long they can stay, or separating families. As a result, many homeless individuals avoid shelters altogether because they feel unsafe or unwelcome. Real solutions that work. Despite the growing crisis, there are proven solutions that can effectively reduce homelessness. Housing. First approach. The Housing First model is one of the most successful strategies for addressing homelessness. This approach prioritizes providing permanent housing without preconditions. Unlike traditional programs that require sobriety or employment before offering assistance, Housing First recognizes that stability is the foundation for recovery. Cities that have implemented Housing First have seen dramatic reductions in homelessness. Houston, Texas, for example, has cut its homeless population by nearly 60% by focusing on getting people into stable housing first, then offering support services. Investing in affordable housing. The U.S. has a massive shortage of affordable housing, which is one of the biggest drivers of homelessness. Expanding access to low-income housing programs, increasing funding for public housing, and incentivizing developers to build affordable units are all necessary steps to tackle the crisis. Mental health and addiction services. Mental illness and addiction are major contributors to homelessness, yet access to treatment remains out of reach for many. Expanding mental health services, creating more treatment facilities, and providing harm reduction programs can help break the cycle of homelessness for those struggling with these issues. Why this matters and how you can help homelessness is not just an issue for those experiencing it. It affects entire communities. It places a strain on public resources, increases crime rates, and impacts the economy. The longer the crisis goes unaddressed, the more difficult and expensive it will be to fix. But change starts with awareness. Educating others about the realities of homelessness helps challenge harmful stereotypes and push for meaningful policy changes. Supporting local organizations that provide shelter, job training, and mental health services is another way to make a difference. Most importantly, advocating for policies that prioritize permanent housing and social services over criminalization is the only way to create lasting change. Homelessness is not inevitable. Other countries have successfully tackled this issue, and America has the resources to do the same. But until we treat housing as a human right rather than a privilege, the crisis will only continue to grow. The real question is not whether we can end homelessness. The real question is, will we?